Did a UFO crash on a Kansas farm on Christmas Day back in 1901? Alex Garcia, a 32-year-old resident of Santa Clara, California, writing into UFOevidence.org, claims that his great-grandfather, Daniel Garcia, was witness to a UFO crash back in 1901. According to Garcia, it was around 11:30 at night, December 25th, Christmas, when his father went outside to use the outhouse, as the farm had no inside facilities. As he was relieving himself, he spotted a glowing light in the dark sky. He could see that it was wobbly and appeared to be losing altitude. He began to follow the flying object on foot and noticed that it was moving closer and closer to the ground, eventually crashing down after about 15 minutes into a nearby field. The area suddenly became enveloped in a blinding bluish light. Daniel ascertained later that it was a sort of beacon coming out from the ship. He ducked low to the ground and continued to watch as a little sphere emerged out of the interior of the ship. The sphere was grayish and kept moving up into the sky as if following the beacon until it was completely out of sight. The crashed object was then incinerated by some force that Daniel could not understand. There was nothing left of it, not even ash, but the beacon of light remained for a while afterwards. Alex claims that his great-grandfather wrote of the bizarre encounter in his personal journal, and that the journal and the story have been passed down through the generations. The grandfather claimed that the object was small. It could have only seated at least two people. And apparently it was triangle-shaped, and Alex believed from reading his grandfather's notes that it was some type of reconnaissance craft, but that's just what he guessed. He doesn't sure or anything, but it's really interesting because the idea that the object incinerated itself. It's similar to there was a case that happened in Feshie in the UK in November, I think it was 2014, where there was military men who were dispatched to an area, and they watched as this object incinerated, burned itself. And at the same time, it was really similar to this case because the object seemed to eject something into the sky. The two cases are really kind of similar, and I'll probably cover the Feshie case at some point, but I just thought I'd mention that. Also, Daniel noted in his journal that despite the fact that it crashed, he could see no visible damage. Daniel Garcia passed away at the age of 45 in what Alex claims was complications due to radiation poisoning. Over in Ohio, another encounter took place that was equally disturbing. A married couple who had recently purchased a home in Fort Hill in Cincinnati, Ohio, began to experience strange things around their property. After about 30 days of living there, a perfect circle appeared in the front yard of the home. Oddly, the circle stayed fresh green no matter what the weather. If that wasn't strange enough, on the night of December 12, 2014, the couple were driving home, passing by Carmel Church. The couple were making their way over a small incline when, 10 feet over the incline in front of their truck, something very strange bounded across the road and ran off into the woods. While the wife never saw it, the husband had a clear view of the creature, and he was in total shock over what he saw. The wife acknowledged in a report to MUFON that her husband was a hardened skeptic. In his late 50s and a proud Marine, he was reluctant to tell of what he saw. When they returned home, the wife had him draw what he saw. The witness claimed that the thing he saw was asphalt gray. It was 7 feet tall. It had muscular legs that were bent backwards, and it had no jawline that he could see. When it ran away, he noticed the legs, and they were bent backwards. It just looked very strange. Apparently, the man was a hardened skeptic who didn't believe in anything to do with the paranormal and Fortean matters. So he was quite shocked at what he saw. And the wife, she had him describe what he saw, to her so she could write it down. And she sent the case into MUFON. There was nothing to indicate that they followed up on the case, but it was just an interesting case that I came across. While a visual sighting like the one this Marine had can be disturbing, one of those you can't see. On August 2nd, 2014, Pam Nicely was alone inside her isolated home in Slanesville, West Virginia, reading a book. It was 10 at night, and she had been reading for approximately 2 hours when she began to notice a strange background noise, which was slowly drowning out the hum of her ceiling fan. To Pam, it sounded like an AM radio with a lot of static. All of a sudden, a male voice started talking. She couldn't understand what he was saying because it was too muffled. It was getting louder and louder, and to Pam, the voice was trying to tell her something. As soon as she stood up to investigate, the voice stopped. Her home was tucked away pretty deep in the woods, far from any neighbors, and she knew it wasn't somebody outside. Whoever it was either in the room with her or was in the very next room. She confessed in her post to ghostvillage.com that the entire event terrified her. Stories of disembodied voices have been connected to aliens, but more often are believed to be ghosts or possibly other dimensional beings attempting to communicate from the other side. Such encounters with the unseen are thoroughly documented in countless EVPs, unlike an encounter that happened to a group of people in Livermore Valley, California. Hot on the heels of the Baltic Sea Millennium Falcon, an eyewitness in California claims to have seen a creature that resembles Chewbacca inside a UFO. Something strange is happening over Livermore Valley in California. On the night of June 27, 2014, 2 witnesses observed multiple UFOs flying over Livermore Valley. When one of the witnesses went inside their house, the second witness claims that the objects, whatever they were, moved towards her at a fast rate of speed. The witness described it as if they were dive bombing her. The next day they were sitting outside having coffee. The witness, who had slept inside the house the previous night, observed something bizarre in the sky. There were some very low clouds hanging above them. In the clouds there were 4 panels visible. Inside each panel stood a being, apparently observing them. The first 2 figures looked human to the witness. Inside the third panel, though, a tall, hairy, humanoid figure stood. The witness actually described the being as looking like, quote, Chewbacca from Star Wars, unquote. Inside the fourth window, a baffling plasma entity could be seen floating. Stunned, the witness alerted their friend, who looked up and also observed the gallery of strange beings. The witness claims that the UFO sightings went on for 2 days and was like nothing they had ever seen before. Stan Gordon has long discussed the link between Bigfoot creatures and UFOs, and this case, if true, would certainly lend some weight to this argument. Further, the Gateshead Gray case, investigated by Richard D. Hall of richplanet.net, also involved an encounter with a Bigfoot alien. Similar to this case, the witness also described the creature as looking like, quote, Chewbacca, unquote. So is Bigfoot just another alien, or possibly their pets, as Figueroa Sanchez Ocheca describes in his book UFO Pets? If you follow the work of David Paulides, Brad Steiger, David McGowan, or Stephen Young, you will see that a large number of people are disappearing out of our national parks and forests. Is it possible that one of these pets are responsible? Certainly they can be aggressive. In Michael Newton's book, When Bigfoot Attacks, scores of cases are documented in which Bigfoot creatures hunt, kill humans, and sometimes eat each other. Such a case was related by a hunter in Nighthawk, Washington. George Brousseau claims that his grandfather, Elliot, encountered a bizarre sight while hunting in the woods of Nighthawk, Washington. The year was 1944. It was late summer, wartime. Elliot, a soldier on leave from the South Pacific, was hunting with some old friends in the thick woods of Nighthawk in an area near what is now known as Log Camp Road. At one point during the hunt, they would happen upon something truly bizarre, something they probably weren't supposed to see. There it was, 2 large hairy creatures, one standing about 7 feet tall or better, the other standing about 6.5 feet tall, engaged in an epic battle. Their hands were clasped together in a club fashion, and they were using them as weapons on each other. Over and over, they swung away, knocking each other to the ground and jumping back up to continue the fight. Elliot noted that they weren't screaming, but instead were making groaning noises, as if to indicate intense effort being exerted during the confrontation. A deer carcass sitting close by appeared to be the reason for the dispute. Eventually, the larger Bigfoot picked up the dead deer and swung it at the smaller Bigfoot, hitting it across the face and knocking him to the ground. The fallen Bigfoot didn't move. The other Bigfoot stared down at him for a few minutes as if checking on him. As the creature began to rise off the ground, the winner bounded off into the trees with the deer. The other Bigfoot got to his feet and trailed the victor into the woods. The entire confrontation lasted only a few minutes. While such encounters in our forests are nothing new, what of those creatures that lurk in the corners of our homes? Creatures we can't describe. Stationed at Fort Benning in the early 2000s, a man, his wife, and their 4-year-old young son had their own run-in with the bizarre when they moved into an inexpensive townhouse not far from the base. It was a small, older model home, a 2-story unit with 2 bedrooms on the top level, and the kitchen, dining room, bathroom, and living room on the lower level. From the very start, they began to sense that something was not quite right in the house. Quote, "We always had the feeling that somebody was right behind us. Those chills that you get on your back," unquote. They comforted themselves knowing that their stay would be temporary as they were waiting to move into a larger home in the area. At around 9 p.m. one night, about the first week after arriving, the couple's son began to throw a tantrum when told to go to bed. As they made their way up the stairs to the bedroom on the 2nd level, the son simply sat at the foot of the stairs, unwilling to move. To scare him, the parents flipped off the lights, and that's when things went crazy. Quote, "I took my eyes off him for just a second before I heard him scream bloody murder. My wife and I turned around and saw my son racing upstairs, screaming that they were biting him," unquote. Bringing him into their bedroom, they managed to calm the child down enough to have him explain what had happened. He told them that while standing at the base of the stairs, he saw what looked like green men approaching him in the semi-darkness, and that as he was running up the stairs, he felt something biting him on his back. Concerned, the parents looked at his backside and found strange round red marks on it. The father, a burly army type standing over 6 feet tall and weighing 250 pounds, was alarmed that somebody might be in his home and made a quick check. He found nothing. In the intervening weeks, things only got worse as the child claimed that he could hear voices coming from the closet. He told his parents that he believed that it was the green men talking. The child eventually stopped sleeping in his room altogether. The father found it odd that at night he would shut the closet door in his son's room only to find it hanging open the next morning. During this time, the father began to hear about the green men from other people stationed at the base. Most frightening to him was that these stories happened in the daycare facilities. The family only spent 3 months at the townhouse and even agreed to pay 3 more months' rent to get out of the contract. To the father, it was well worth it. Quote, "Being a parent, I would give my life for my children, but how do you keep your children safe from things like these green men?" Unquote. From the things we don't know to the things we know and love, Steve Irwin was a much beloved nature conservationist who became popular on Crocodile Hunter television series, which began in 1996. His seemingly boundless love and enthusiasm for animals made him a fan favorite around the world. Sadly, as most of us know, Irwin passed away on September 4, 2006, after being pierced in the chest by a stingray barb while filming an underwater documentary titled Ocean's Deadliest at Bat Reef, part of the Great Barrier Reef near Port Douglas in Queensland. The world mourned the loss of a kind and wonderful man. Strangely, not long after his passing, rumors began to circulate around the internet that Port Douglas, where Steve met his untimely end, was haunted. Pino Termini of Naples in the south of Italy came forward in late 2008 to tell of his own bizarre sighting. Having dived for the Italian Navy for 7 years, Termini spent much of his time traveling the world in search of other diving spots. Despite all the beautiful locations he traveled to, none would be as memorable as the diving spot in North Queensland. November 2008, Termini arrived at Port Douglas for his 8th time. The Great Barrier Reef was fast becoming one of his most favorite playgrounds, and he had heard from other divers that Bat Reef was worth visiting. He chartered a boat from Port Douglas and made his way out to the area for his planned exploration. Quote, as I started my dive, I saw somebody and was surprised because I saw no other boats around. Then I noticed that the person had no oxygen tank or mask. The person swam towards me, and I realized that it was none other than the crocodile hunter himself, Steve Irwin. I freaked out, but he looked calm and at peace, unquote. So this Germany guy was diving and at Bat Reef, and he claims that he saw something coming towards him that was human looking, and he thought it was strange because he didn't see any boats in the area when he went diving, and he just thought it was strange that there would be somebody else down there, But then it dawned on him that whoever this person was, they weren't wearing oxygen tanks, which he found to be really strange. But as this person got closer to him, he realized that it was the crocodile hunter, Steve Irwin, who passed away 2 years earlier. And he said that obviously he was frightened, but he claimed that Irwin looked at peace. He seemed calm and at peace. There's no indication that Irwin even acknowledged he was there. But who knows what would have happened if Steve Irwin had attempted to communicate with him. But he was adamant that it really happened, that he did see him there, and that Steve Irwin is still haunting the area where he died. So